So in this video, I want to talk about why Ukraine won't run out of weapons anytime soon. They may have to conserve, but they're not going to run out. Okay, my name is Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to provide context in the war in Ukraine. So in the morning daily brief, I put this out. Air defense eliminates 11 out of 24 enemy shaheeds. And why are they pulling their punches? Why aren't they shooting everything down like they used to? Well, they have to conserve. Same thing here. Ukraine says it can't fire more than 2,000 shells a day as Western allies fail to meet pledges. Okay, and we know that Congress keeps dithering. They're not actually making the deals. Some would argue that they don't want to make any kind of deal. It's just a stalling tactic for 9 months. I don't believe that. I think they're working through a process, but it's not working like you would hope it would work. So there is a solution, and Russia's hot about it. And if Russia's hot about it, that's probably a good thing. Moscow, this is today, Moscow slams South American nation for caving to U.S. pressure on weapons. Ecuador? How's Ecuador involved? Watch this. Ecuador must understand that sending Russian-made arms to the U.S. violates existing agreements, the foreign ministry has warned. Okay, well, you weren't worried about that when it was North Korea or Iran providing Russia weapons, but now you're worried about it because of what's happening here. Ecuador has made a rash decision by caving to U.S. demands for its old military equipment, Maria Zakharova has said. What? Ecuador has made a rash decision by giving the U.S. weapons? What's going on there? Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa has announced that his country will provide the U.S. with outdated Russian-made military equipment despite Moscow's protests, claiming that the equipment is not war material, but rather scrap. Okay, so why are they calling it scrap? Well, it's really interesting. It's called the ring trade. So the Russians are hot because they're providing scrap material to the U.S. and what? Okay, but it's not really scrap material. What it is something more along the lines of older but still usable military hardware that is designated scrap, and it's provided to the United States. In return, the US is going to provide them some updates, and this is how it works. Here's Forbes magazine talking about it. First Ecuador, now Greece. Joe Biden is finding more and more countries to help him arm Ukraine. Okay, so the name of this is called the ring trade. Remember that term. Increasingly, it's how US President Joe Biden is arming Ukraine. He did it with Ecuador, and now he's doing it with Greece too. So Greece is involved in the same thing. So he's doing this with Ecuador. Greece is going to be the next one that they're going to be giving. The U.S. will give arms to in order to have Greece provide their older stocks to Ukraine. A ring trade is, in essence, a circular swap. One country pays or arms a second country, so the second country can arm a third country. Germany pioneered the ring trade, giving to, for example, the Czech Republic. They gave 14 Leopard 2 tanks and an engineering vehicle in exchange for the Czech Republic giving Ukraine potentially dozens of T-72 tanks. They gave Greece 40 Marauder fighting vehicles so that Greece could donate to Ukraine 40 BMP-1 fighting vehicles. Slovakia. They gave Slovakia 15 Leopard 2 tanks in compensation for 30 BVP-1 fighting vehicles. Slovenia. They gave them 45 military-grade heavy trucks so Slovenia would give Ukraine 28 M55 tanks. The United States, with its greater stocks of old weapons, eventually could surpass Germany as a ring trader. And you can see just how that could go. And good on Germany, because Germany was really leading that charge with Poland, with the Baltics, of really trying to arm Ukraine with these heavy armored vehicles early on. In early January, Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa revealed in a radio interview that Ecuador would give the United States scrap weapons in exchange for new weapons worth $200 million that the United States would provide at a later date. Now, the worth of $200 million doesn't sound like much, but there's some funny accounting going on here that is really interesting. The United States would then donate the scrap to Ukraine. Some of that old hardware apparently already shipped aboard an airlifter on January 25th. It's possible to guess what weapons Ecuador indirectly offered Ukraine. OSA air defense vehicles. The Cold War vintage Soviet-made OSA combines with a radar and quad launcher for 6-mile range missiles. Ecuador years ago acquired 10 of these from, guess what? Ukraine. How about that? So they know what they have, and they're not the only ones who have it. And if you can continue this ring trade elsewhere, well, you can keep this rolling. It's not the world's best air defense system, but it's simple and reliable. Ukraine went to war with perhaps 100 OSAs. They've lost about 16 as far as we can tell. Prior to Ecuador's apparent donation, Ukraine had gotten surplus OSAs from Poland. The White House followed up with the Ecuadorian ring trade with a bigger three-way arms deal later in January, one with Greece in the intermediary role, and the Russians aren't happy about that either. According to a Greek newspaper, the Biden administration offered the government in Athens 3 87-foot Protector-class patrol boats, 2 Lockheed Martin C-130 airlifters, 10 Allison T-56 turboprop engines for Lockheed P-3 patrol planes, plus 60 M2 Bradley fighting vehicles and a consignment of transport trucks. In exchange for this largesse, the Americans want the Greeks to donate more weapons, and it's not specified how many of those weapons are what, but as with Ecuador, the trade could involve air defense equipment, S-300 and Hawk long-range missiles and launchers, and Tor and OSA short-range missiles and launchers. Okay, so you're seeing how it works. And that pattern can play out again and again if they just can find countries who are willing to upgrade their stocks if they just work with the U.S. Joe Biden, as the president, as the commander-in-chief, has excess defense articles authority. What does that mean? It means that the law is written in such a way that he can donate military surplus wherever he sees fit, up to the amount of $500 million annually. But the law also doesn't say how much the monetary value actually is of the things that he's donating. So theoretically, he could even say that this is worth $0. It's just our scrap that we're giving for their scrap. The main catch for the beneficiary is that the law doesn't allow the United States to pay for transportation, so Ecuador is going to have to come pick it up from the United States. But that's not a bad deal, all things considered. In relying on his existing financing authority, in particular his excess defense articles authority, Biden's options are fewer. So far, he's keenest to offer financing or free excess weapons to ring trade brokers so that the brokers can provide Ukraine with Soviet-style weapons the Ukrainians are already comfortable operating. Well, that makes a lot of sense, and there are a number of countries that have the Soviet-style weapons that the Ukrainians can just plug and play. All right, last little bit, Ecuador to transfer, this is in Pravda now, Ecuador to transfer old Russian weapons to the U.S. despite Moscow's protests. Same kind of article. Russia calls equipment transfer an unfriendly step. Of course, when they do it, it's not a problem. On January 16th, the head of the U.S. Southern Command, General Laura Richardson, said that Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and 6 other countries still had Russian weapons. So if they can get some of these Russian weapons from other places, that would be great. Now, it's probably not coming from Cuba, but there are other countries where they can get this. And it's not limited to just countries with Soviet-style weapons. Kremlin official Dmitry Peskov said that Russia would closely monitor the U.S. attempts to convince Latin American countries to transfer weapons to Kyiv. According to him, it's necessary to keep in mind legal restrictions on any supplies to third countries. Again, the hypocrisy is just mind-numbing, but that's how the ring trade would work. And I think it's one way that the U.S. can supplement, and I don't perceive that anytime soon, Ukraine's going to run out of weapons. Will they have to conserve in the short term? Sure, certainly. But as far as ultimately running out, I just don't see that. All right. Thank you for your time. Tell me what you think. Put it in the comments below. Thank you for the likes and the shares and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.